So, Kevin, I
jokes?
heard you're good with corny jokes. I hate to put you on the spot, but you're on the spot.
You mean just tell a random corny joke?
Don't do the numbers joke.
I'm like,
Ooh, let's hear the numbers joke.
We're taking it up from toddler level.
oh, that's everybody knows that joke. Why is 6 afraid of 7?
Because 7, 8, 9? I've never heard that. I just figured it out.
You are
IQ 100.
Well, Amanda, Kevin, thanks for coming on. We've been really excited to have you. And I think from the first time you and I chatted about this being a possibility, I mean, your name came up immediately. I'm looking at you, but the two of you, I mean, Yonderyear was...
It was like Amanda and Kevin if you'll do it too.
Kevin, if we have to have
Yeah.
But thanks for taking the time, Kevin, from your schedule. And
Yeah, thanks.
come
Thanks
on,
for
really
having us.
excited to have you. Your farm is an inspiration to us because unlike us, I can't speak for you, buddy, but I feel like you're more along the lines of Yonderyear, but you're so thoughtful and deliberate with how you do things and what you do, and you take time, and when you do it so well. We kind of fall on the other end of the spectrum. We've talked about before. We just think of something and we got to do it right then, and it's done to a 75% solution. Sometimes works. We just operate differently, but the way you operate your farm is really inspirational to us. So eager to hear your perspective on those things. But just to give everybody a once over the world, Yonderyear, a market flower farm, as well as grass-fed meats of several different species. It's a beautiful piece of heaven in the Shenandoah Valley. And so we're eager to hear about it and the backstory. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so
It's
fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
And also of note, you guys were in the same neighborhood. So like from where we sit now, your house is probably like 5-6 miles
Yeah.
over the hill.
It's a
which is pretty
dream.
cool. Yeah.
We love events at Big Spring.
Yeah.
If we forget something, not a big deal.
Yeah, just pop back to the farm. I wanted to ask you guys because my experience of farming, I think, must be very different than flower farming because, raising livestock, I'm thinking of the day when you guys met me on Route 60 because our bulls were in the middle of Route 60 and helped us crawl through the woods and fight them back into their paddock. But with that said, I would love to hear, as just kind of to get a picture of what your farm is like. Can you give us a day in the life of Amanda and Kevin farming? And then could you also give us what is, if there is one, your like bulls getting out story? What is like one crazy thing that has happened on the farm that you could share?
Oh, I can think of one.
So like day in the
Usually
life and
day in the
crazy.
life.
Okay. Well, we are currently 1.25, maybe 0.2 employees. Kevin still has a full-time job. So our days begin early. I get up and do things inside to get the kids ready. Kevin goes outside to do animal chores. Kids to school. I'm usually outside by 8 and knock out as much as I can before 3:45 in the afternoon when we go to get the kids. So I would say the early morning is animal focused. The midday is plant and flower focused.
Are you out on the land every day for business purposes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. As many hours as I can fit in.
Kevin, how about you?
Mostly mornings and evenings, and then like weekend projects. I'm still working a full-time job, and so that's, I'm fortunate that I can do it mostly remotely. There's some travel, but, mostly from home. So I'm there, which is both a tremendous benefit and a challenge because I have an office with great windows. So I'm looking out all day, every day on the beautiful farm. So
Your
All the
wife
stuff
on
that
the
needs to
land.
get done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just
Amanda out
just
there working.
jealously watching Amanda digging in the dirt.
But we have really tightened those animal chores to a 30 minutes, unless there's a bigger project. Of course, like we intensively rotate our animals so that we can really maximize that nutrient absorption in the soil. But I think for the most part, day-to-day stuff, Kevin's gotten that down to a tight 30, which is kind of what we have to do.
What livestock do you have currently?
Right now, sheep, Katahdin hair sheep, that we're raising for meat. We had Jersey beef for a couple years. We raised a small herd of Jersey cattle from, I think have you hosted?
Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Creambrook.
From Creambrook.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah.
So
We took some of their
we
bulls.
took bull calves and raised them up for a few years for some grass-fed beef, which was incredible. And we did it for the purpose of rehabilitating our pastures.
Our property had been in hay for over 40 years and only hay. So when we bought our acreage, there was zero biodiversity. So that was
Fescue farm mostly.
that was one of our first goals, was to really increase the soil nutrient value.
And it's been unbelievable to see the biodiversity return over just the last few years from on the same piece of land. The animal life that you can see is the difference is it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What change have you seen?
Oh, well, I mean, I would say it started with birds. I mean, our house was, it was a house in the middle of a hayfield, 7-8 acres of hay with some like scrub forest surrounding it. So, I mean, I would say definitely first the birds, second insects, pollinators, and then third, larger mammals and things like that. We have a family of wild turkeys. They had babies this spring, and we've watched them grow up, which is really sweet.
That's awesome.
More deer than we'd like, but I think that's a problem for everybody, so we'll take it. Snakes, which get rid of our rodents, seeing more and more of those. So it's just, it's more complete.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful picture too of like how nature works its way back in, and the first thing you notice were the birds. I just can imagine, a quiet pastoral experience versus when you hear the birds singing in the trees.
Yeah.
That is so sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had multiple people comment when I put up videos about like hearing the birds, and it's to the point now where I don't really even notice it.
Yeah.
But then I go back after someone comments on it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like a song.
Yeah.
Every time I'm outside, it's incredible.
So Kevin, you're in working remotely typically, and then you'll get outside for projects, or I guess probably if there's an emergency or something.
Yeah, if there's a bed that needs to be turned over, maybe there's an hour of work somewhere in there that I can churn out. We have a BCS. We don't use a tractor or anything. We just use a 2-wheel BCS tractor for turning over our beds, and that thing is like 300 pounds.
Yeah.
So I often get that job.
Yeah, I don't have great knees, so Kevin gets that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So little jobs here and there. Love doing deliveries, and then big projects we often do together. But yeah, my schedule is not as much of a routine just because it's kind of fitting in to all of the corners, which is the sort of I think maybe is a theme for. I'm guessing maybe a theme for folks that you're interviewing on the podcast, which is when you're doing new things, you're kind of getting creative about how you fit it all into your schedule and make it all work.
What's your crazy farm story that came to mind?
Oh, the first one that jumped into my mind, though we may think of others, is one day. You know what I'm talking about?
Is it the backbreaker?
Oh no, that's a good one though.
That's a good one.
I want to hear this one
All right,
too now.
I'll try to be brief. The one
need.
that I was thinking
No
of is there was just one day where a lot of things happened at once, which also may be a theme.
Oh, this is good too.
And so we had 3 things all happen at the same time. One was a tractor trailer delivery of compost. So we make our own compost on the farm, but at this point in time, we still have to bring in a lot.
So a little backstory on this. This was during COVID. Freight costs had gone like out the roof. So we had to get this compost delivered. And I was like, well, I'm not paying for the transit charge twice. I ordered 35 cubic yards of compost,
Whoa.
which had to come on a tractor trailer.
Yeah.
So that's the first visual.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the driver expected, the situation he was coming into. So, long story short, on that one, that was a whole thing, trying to figure out how to get that dumped without getting the truck stuck. And it was a very complicated situation where the truck was having to navigate around some.
How did he even get to your driveway? Because like once you get on your property, your road, I think if I'm a tractor trailer driver, I could get around. They have like a big loop, through their property that's easily navigable. But getting there is one other thing. Like your road is called Adair Hill Road for a reason, because you're on the top of this huge hill with this crazy gravel road.
I think what he ended up doing is coming in our top entrance and then backing up into the Dishman's driveway.
Oh, and then going out, turn right. That makes sense. Because if he tried to go down, there's
that
a
hairpin
hill.
turn,
He would never make it out.
No.
They'd have to drag him out with a crane.
Also, just adding one more point in, because this is very important. It was late March and
So it was mud season,
and wind. I mean, it was there were probably like 25-mile-an-hour winds this day.
Yeah, it was the all the factors were at play. So I was coming home from something, maybe dropping the kids off somewhere or something. So I pull into the driveway, and Amanda's dealing with this situation with the driver trying to not have an 18-wheeler stuck in the middle of our field. And I pull in, and there are two Great Pyrenees chasing our cattle and barking at them. And I'm
From like your neighbors?
Not your
or-
dogs.
Yeah, have you
No,
seen
not
these?
your
No.
dogs.
And I'm thinking, what is this? I don't know what's happening here, but they're spooking everybody on the farm. Our livestock guardian dog, Flora, she's down with the sheep. She's going nuts in that paddock, trying to protect her buddies, the cattle.
Gosh.
And I don't know if it's like the truck driver, his dogs that he brought, but there's a situation happening there. So I'm trying to corral them, and they seem like they're trying to attack the animals. So I'm trying to deal with that situation and get as serious about that as possible. And then at that moment, in drives Judge Russell, who is our local Rockbridge Circuit Court judge, who came to pick up some flowers that day.
Oh, gosh.
Unannounced.
Unannounced.
Which is fine. We love visitors, but
This was not an idea.
Rough timing.
I mean,
Rough timing.
But
Judge.
so it was like, it's obviously somebody who's a great guy and prominent in the community. I'm chasing around these Great Pyrenees dogs, trying to get them off the farm, and Amanda's dealing with this 18-wheeler, and it was just kind of one of these moments where
the judge shows up.
everything's happening at once.
I
And
think you had gone to get your rifle at this point too.
You got your gun.
I didn't know if you were going to
Good
bring that up on the
afternoon,
podcast.
Judge.
Well-
Welcome to our bucolic farm.
Right.
So I didn't know what these dogs were going to do, and obviously I wasn't going to shoot them, but I got my shotgun and
shoot near them just to scare
just to
'em.
kind of just in case, you didn't know what's going to happen. And I also called the sheriff's office to just say somebody needs to come get these dogs. And so the judge shows up, the animal control shows up. I've got my shotgun on my shoulder, chasing these dogs around.
The 35 cubic yards of compost, the trailer is piked
Oh, yeah.
all the way up into the air.
Yeah.
This gust of wind comes. It almost
Spread your
sides
compost for you.
Like
Yeah.
ruins his whole trailer and truck.
Oh.
Luckily, he manages to get it back down. I don't know how,
Yeah.
but that was a lot. One dog bit you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Oh
did
my
get- I got bit by one of the dogs. Ended up, the owner ended up coming and taking his dogs away, and the sheriff's
After the
office.
podcast, you can tell us who the owner was.
Yeah. He was very nice about it. They came from a long way away. I don't know how they made
Yeah.
it to our place, but got that dog rabies tested, and
Yeah.
it was just one of those days where everything's happening at once.
I love that. I think that's one of the things about farming. We do so on a lesser scale than you all. Entrepreneurship in general, but then farming on top of that there is never, ever a dull moment. For better, for worse, there's never a dull moment. And it's beautiful. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You mentioned in the beginning this sort of that we've talked about many times before, this kind of two ends of the spectrum that we
Right.
sit on, and of course that Amanda and I, sort of, and the same is true for Buddy and Jill, of course, sort of revere, the fearlessness with which
It's true.
you go after things without overthinking them. And so I think sometimes those moments of chaos can be Good learning experiences for us, but even more trying for the type that I think we are, which is
because you had carefully planned it.
plan
Everything was
everything,
right. And then it all just whirlwind.
Yeah. Those are good experiences to have.
Yeah.
Can we, your story is intriguing to us, and I think the listeners, because Kevin, you don't come from a long line of flower farmers, and I don't think you do, Amanda.
No.
And you're good at so many things. So take us back, briefly talk about maybe how you met, how you started this journey, and how did you end up flower farming over pastry baking? Or why didn't you continue the cakes? There's a lot of different aspects that I'm curious about. If you could talk origin story to Yonderyear.
Yeah. Yes. Neither of us comes from a agricultural background. I grew up as a child, as I think many children do, loving to get my hands in the dirt with my grandparents. And that was something that I really enjoyed until early teenage years. And then, you're busy with social things and you step away from that part of life for a little while, but always kind of loved nature and appreciated that part of my early childhood, to the point that when I was in the Peace Corps after graduating from W&L, which is where Kevin and I met, I helped to manage an organic greenhouse. And so kind of got back to being able to be more of a practitioner, out of the academic setting. Went to graduate school in international agricultural development. So sort of how global commodities and the way that agricultural goods are produced nowadays affects small scale farmers in developing countries and the global food chain. And I was writing my dissertation and thinking about what I might want to do after I finished. And I had this realization that I didn't want to sit behind a desk, that I really wanted to be in the field. And so many of those policy jobs, they are sitting behind a desk and managing. They're not so much being out in the world. And so that's when Kevin and I had a chat. We decided to make a hard pivot. Friend of a friend, we ended up knowing a really famous chef out in Washington State, Renee Erickson. And so I said, I want to learn kind of the end part of food production and what's done when, local farmers are making this beautiful product and they're sent to someone who can do amazing things with them. So we packed up everything, and it was easy because we didn't have children yet, and moved all the way from DC out to Seattle.
What year was that?
That was in 2013.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Trial by fire. A lot of chefs on the West Coast are not classically trained. So you train on your feet, which was great for me. And Renee saw me. I went out to stage for a weekend before we committed to moving. And
Stage means like apprentice.
yeah.
Okay.
And she liked what she saw, I guess, just somebody who was willing to work hard and figure it out as they went. So, just worked on the line in one of her new restaurants, and then eventually transitioned into pastry. It was just more of something that I liked. The hours and the cadence of pastry was more to my liking. And I guess around the end of 2 years in Seattle, Kevin and I had turned 30. Kevin was convinced he wanted to have kids. I was being convinced. But we did know we wanted land. And I don't know if you know anything about property value in the counties surrounding Seattle, but we could not afford any of that. And all of our family was back here. And so we came back for one of my best friend's weddings, Kelly Melvin.
Oh, awesome.
And that weekend we decided,
Wow.
it's time to make the move back. It didn't hurt that it was late September and it was gorgeous here, and Seattle was like rainy and gray.
Yeah.
When at that point, when you said we want to move back east, want to have land,
Yeah.
were you thinking at that time you wanted to be a producer of these goods, or were you thinking I want to continue doing the end of the line product in the restaurant industry?
So I think we had kind of a vision of growing and using what we grew for baking. Was sort of the idea we had in our heads. But Kevin and I also knew from growing up here and Kevin having spent so much time in Rockbridge as well, that so much of the land here does not go on the market. The best property never reaches the market. And so we were like, we kind of have to see what's available, like move back. We lived with my parents, scouted the county, and wanted to know what we could get before we settled on something. It was a little bit of just like seeing what fit rather than like square peg round holing it. And I knew that I had the baking skills and we were moving back, and I got pregnant shortly after we moved back. We were still living with my parents when we were pregnant with Nellie, and my mom made me salads every night and I got so angry. But so finally we found this property on a Dare Hill. It was not on the market. We wrote a letter. Turns out the person was interested in selling. But as soon as we saw that land and it was all in hay, we were like, this is the long game. Like we are going to have to take our time. Another area of interest that we had was cider production. So I think one of the first things we did to increase the biodiversity was plant a bunch of cider apple trees, which we still have. We have it's not thriving yet because we planted on semi-standard stock, so everything's still kind of growing. But we got those in the ground. That started increasing the biodiversity. It really expanded with a lot of perennials. And then I would say by year 3 was when we got into animals. And slowly, I was baking all throughout this because obviously being an entrepreneur, you've got that energy. It's got to go somewhere, right? So I'm like baking and using that skill set. But as the farm became more and more developed, the vision of flowers took hold because we only have 30 acres. Only 8 of those are arable land. We wanted to have a value-added product, and we wanted a lot of diversity in our product. And we wanted to be able to be creative with whatever we produced. And so flowers were kind of a natural fit for all of those outlets that we wanted, all of those things that we wanted to achieve with our farm.
So you dabbled in baking initially because that's when we first met.
Yep, that's when we first met. And
what were you doing and how were you doing it?
All right, so we had the farm. We had moved in. We actually were doing a bunch of renovation on the house while we were pregnant, still living at my parents', and Nellie was born almost 3 weeks early. So we lived in an Airbnb for the first week of Nellie's life, then finally moved in. And we got a few things in the ground, but for the most part, having a first child was a real shock to the system. And I was like, I have to do something that's adult. I was not settled into being a full-time mom. So that is it was the natural outlet for me. I was like, well, I can bake. I've got all of these skills. It's something that I can do from home. And that's sort of how Little Hill Pastries was born. And it was a great thing to do while I was home, and we didn't have a farm yet that was up and running and required 100% of my time. So,
and you did cakes for weddings because I remember that's how we met. I can't remember if you reached out or we reached out, but we were like, yeah, come to Big Spring. Let's sit down. I'd love to hear about your business so I can, basically pitch what you're doing to brides. And you baked cakes for, a bunch of weddings over those first year or two that you were doing that, right? Yeah,
we did. And that was fun. And then when Seasons Yield, when y'all started doing your market days, your vendor days, we did cakes for those too. And that was a lot of fun. And I think that portion happened during COVID. And that in particular was so amazing because it was that community. You talked about it on your podcast when you were interviewed, like that community that everyone was missing during the time. And to show up and like have people be so excited to eat a piece of cake was like, it was the perfect thing at the perfect time.
Your cakes too, I will just say, like we said at the beginning of the podcast,
best cakes.
And I'm going to sound like the fatty that I am about this, but they were so insane. It felt like you were like at a wedding when you got the cake, a slice of that cake at bread day. It was like, wow, this is special. I remember when we came over to y'all's house for dinner, like first time ever hanging out, and you're culinary expertise is on a whole nother level that I've only got glimpses of. I remember going to your house and we're like hanging out, having a glass of wine, and you're like, help yourself to this tray of stuff. And I was like, oh, I can eat those because it looks so beautiful. I thought it was like a centerpiece.
Display piece.
Yeah. And you're like, no, those are olives, buddy. Like, oh, amazing. Anyway, I just had to sing y'all's praises because that excellence was there when you were doing the bakery too. And I see it now with the flowers as well.
Thank you. That's really sweet.
We just recently celebrated my birthday, and Amanda made your all-time favorite, the apple cider donut cake.
Oh, man.
So good.
I don't have any left for you, but I should have brought some.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Just rubbing it in.
We'll bring one your way
Yeah.
soon. So yeah, but I think that having that itch, I mean, it kind of goes back to it goes back to the Peace Corps, and then like working on the line, and then like making cakes, and then like always having this sort of like engineering or like structural problem that you've got to figure out. Like that kind of like grind and energy is like where I thrive. The deliverable of like a wedding day. I don't think as an entrepreneur that I would feel fulfilled if I didn't have some of that. Mm-hmm. And it's not without its complication. I mean, Kevin bears the brunt of that grind, but I think I've tightened it to be usually 30 minutes of panic, and then we're good.
You're good.
I think that's part of it too.
Yeah.
That's kind of part of the whole, that emotional roller coaster when you think maybe this thing that we're trying to make succeed today might not work.
Yeah.
That's part of the joy of it, is that it's not guaranteed. And there's a moment or sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes a few hours of, some measure of panic, uncertainty. Yeah. That, you don't know.
Why is that compelling? Why is that sought after? Because I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I wonder why that's the case. Because I think to a lot of people that would be intimidating enough not to do something like that. Like, oh, there's a chance we could fail this bride without delivering these flowers, or the whole wedding rides on this cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know.
It's the adrenaline.
We're not interested in. We went to Vegas one time, and neither of us gambled a penny. Like, we're not interested in, casino gambling or anything. It's like our kind of
life
getting that
gambling.
rush.
Yeah.
But I would say, going back to the journey, just to like bring it full circle, the pastries and the farming, it was like a perfect like percentage trade. Like, we started out with the pastries as the farm was growing, and then I think around 2020, it was like a very significant decision to move into flowers once we had that foundation on the farm of on-farm fertilized soil, our increased biodiversity, and a very firm plan of what we wanted to do with the flowers and what we wanted to achieve.
That's a theme I think we've heard a few times now on the podcast, interviewing folks and going through our stories, where you can have like the one thing that you do and it just is the meteoric rise sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so many people, it's exactly what you just said, where you're kind of like swinging from one branch and you're like, okay, I'm going to grab this next one.
Yep.
And that's certainly Jill's and my story. I know for you, same. And it's cool to see that with you guys. I think like many people, as they're listening, if they're thinking about, starting something, they might think like that, I've got to get this thing figured out so I can take it to this dream place that I want it to be. And it's like, well, like I love, as I'm hearing you tell your story, it's like you knew you could bake. You felt confident in that. Like, I'm going to start baking then, because the farm's not exactly where I want it to be. I'm going to start baking. And I love that too. And that way it gave you that runway to transition into, I guess, what was your bigger vision for that property.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, you kind of ground it in your values and the sort of the goals that you have that aren't, it's less about the specific thing, the exact thing itself, and more about the sort of goals underneath it that have to do with.
Yeah. What are those for you all? Those goals and values that are shaping
that question. I think, it's always been, an aspiration to do something together that is connected to our relationship, to a family, to a piece of land, to our community.
Yep.
And it's kind of, it's kind of those elements, to pursue something hard together. And I think over time we've learned more and more that part of that for us is getting our hands in the dirt.
Yeah. And like the physical exertion part.
Being tired at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We often sort of joke that a good way to compare is if you're showering at the type of day is if you're showering at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. And the days where you have to shower at the end of the day because you're so dirty and sweaty from the hard work, those are the best ones.
Yeah.
The good days.
When did you realize that those values or focuses were important to you? Because it's easy to sit here and say, "Oh yeah, with the, these are our values." Now, but when did those come into focus for you all? Because was it Peace Corp time? We haven't talked about your career, but when did those things kind of get less fuzzy or more focused for you all?
I think land and growing and a certain boundedness to the seasons. I think that was early. I would say that was the love of nature and the environment is something that Kevin and I had in common. I think one of the foundational points of our relationship. Community and understanding how important that is, I would say is a newer thing for us. I mean, and I don't think that is a bad thing, but we come from a millennial generation, where everyone is going to be the person that changes the world.
Yeah.
Themselves. They don't need anybody else.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's unique to us to move to a place and be like, okay, we're on our little farm. We've got this. That's fine. We're going to do our own thing. And that wasn't our intention. It's just kind of, we did what we did for a number of years. And then slowly, I think as particularly I became more confident in why we were here, what made us come back to Lexington, more confident in myself as both a mother and an entrepreneur, we could branch out more and be more involved in community. And that has only made us, I think, stronger.
Yeah. I would add I think the goal is to do something together, to build something together. A lot of that comes from Amanda was in the Peace Corps right after undergrad. We both graduated from W&L here in Lexington, and Amanda a year before me, and she went off to the Peace Corps in the archipelago called Tonga in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And after I graduated, I went and spent a year teaching English in rural Cambodia. And obviously this was early days in our college relationship. So I wouldn't say anything was guaranteed, and it was really a sort of crucible for us, that long distance relationship.
Other sides of the planet, literally.
I mean, it's about as, hearing your story of not speaking to Fawn for months and months at a time, I think is that's another level. So I don't want to compare with that. But I would ride my bike to town, to the internet cafe in town 3 or 4 days a week to call Amanda from the internet cafe at her tiny little shack in Tonga.
Oh my gosh.
So we really had that experience of consciously choosing to be in a partnership that had, it had everything kind of against it. So for me, that I think is a source of a lot of that aspiration for us to say, well, and I'm not disparaging anyone else's, choices or lifestyle, but there's a lot that sort of modern life pushes us towards, that where you have your home and a certain amount of things that happen there in the home, and your job or your work is going some other place away from your family and away from your partner, and then your recreation is also going some other place away from home, maybe just with your partner. But it's just a lot of disaggregation, sort of atomization of kind of our lives in modern life. And I think this is not unique to our community here, but for us that's sort of always been a sort of value, I suppose.
Yeah, to integrate, to kind of go against the tendency of our culture to parcel everything out into its boxes, but to try to integrate it all together. Yeah, that's really admirable. And I think Daniel and I have our versions of that we're trying to do too, with, I know you homeschool, Daniel, and Jill and I coursework from the house. And there's all of its unique joys and struggles, I guess you could say. But
for sure,
that's I think that's another common thread for us as entrepreneurs is like that dream of, I guess as you were kind of putting it, like integrating all of those things that are, what's the word you use? Atomized?
Aggregate and atomize.
You guys are so smart.
This is some unfamiliar verbiage here on this podcast.
I'm going to need a dictionary. Bringing that all together is a common thread for people that are like, oh, if I could just get out of this 9 to 5 and be home and do this dream job that I want to have. So it's really cool. I think that really strikes a chord. I know it strikes a chord with me.
Can we focus on what Yonderyear looks like right now? So you transitioned from pastry and baking to flower farming, livestock farming. Yep. I think the predominant cash cow is flower farming, but I can't say that for certain.
Sure.
So can you give a snapshot of what the farm looks like right now? What makes money?
Yeah.
And what the operation is, what are your sales outlets? What does it look like right now?
Sure. So we are currently actively growing 3 areas of the farm. Our perennial orchard, which is the slow game. Our lamb, which is our grass-fed meat outlet, which we're slowly growing every year. We're not buying animals in. And then flowers, and flowers that is where we are making our money right now. In terms of sales outlets, we have 3. We have direct retail, and that's local. We have wholesale. We sell wholesale directly to a few people, but mostly through Blue Ridge Flower Exchange, which we do in partnership with Larkin Sky Farm, Petal and Pale Farm, and Thornfield Farm, and all of them are in the Buchanan area. So,
what does that mean? What does the aggregate look like?
Yeah. So it is through a platform called Rooted Farmers, and they actually originated in Richmond, but they are a website and a wholesale kind of like, what would you call it? Like a program for flower farms.
Revolutionizing farming one flower at a time.
Yeah. So the original,
just looked it up.
Yeah, the original one is River.
You just knew that off the top of your
River
head.
City Flower Exchange in Richmond.
Okay.
And then Susanna Thornton at Thornfield Farm did a workshop with them this winter and was like, how can we create our own flower exchange that's more local to like our area of Virginia? So
cool.
Blue Ridge Flower Exchange was created. And so what we do every week is we upload our inventory. So it's like photo, description, and then estimate, like a 10 stem count is generally how you sell flowers wholesale. And people buy from the site, and then I deliver once a week.
The challenge with doing flowers wholesale, which is not unique, I think, to flowers, but maybe it's exaggerated, is just direct to a florist. We can't reproduce the consistency, let alone the volume of inventory that they can fly in from, or they can get from wholesalers who are flying in from Colombia and Ecuador. And so it's hard to compete, even though we have way more variety.
Yeah.
We think a way better product, but it's hard to compete with that consistency. So just by aggregating sellers a little bit, but still keeping it pretty hyper local, you can get a little bit more of an advantage with the the outlets that the florists that want to buy wholesale?
Well, I would say also that it's hard to compete with the way that traditional floristry works currently. And by that, I mean the florist model that people are used to. If you like go into a typical florist shop and it's like roses, Gabura daisies, baby's breath, eucalyptus, like all stuff that can sit in a refrigerated cooler for like a month at a time after it's sprayed and conditioned and flown in from another country.
And they're there year round because they're flown from whatever climate is in season. And,
Exactly.
yeah.
But what we are trying to do and what local flower sales are trying to do is offer the flowers that can't be shipped, offer the interesting things, give florists something that their clients are seeing in all of this new social media that's coming out around the flower farmer industry. All of these like new interesting installations that are happening, bridal magazines. Those are flowers that florists can't always get. I mean, it's really hard for a florist to order in dahlias, for example, because they don't do well with transit.
Is that what this is right here? Just for everybody.
These are dahlias,
Okay.
yes.
Man, they're amazing.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So it is about, it is difficult, but it's also about changing what is desirable. And so that's a bit of what we're trying to do too. And this season was a challenge for us for wholesale because Susanna came to me in March. Actually, we had a farm inspection. We are part of the Certified Naturally Grown Network, which is a grassroots farmer-led organic movement. It's a nonprofit based out of Vermont. And basically we have all of the same growing standards, if not more strict standards than the National Organic Program. But because we're farmer to farmer based and we're accountable to other farmers, we have to have inspections every year. We can be held to those standards without paying the like $50,000 buy-in to the National Organic Program through the U.S. government. So it's a great program. Susanna is part of that. And actually she came to do our farm inspection in March, which is how we started talking about Blue
cool.
Ridge.
Yeah.
And at that point we were already, I mean, flower farming, regular farming, you're planning like 12 to 18 months out.
Yeah.
So when she was like, do you want to hop on wholesale for this year? I was like, oh, sure. So we did, and it was really successful for us. But like Kevin mentioned, we didn't have like 50 10 stem bunches of white snapdragons, for example. We had like 5, 10, because we were growing for our clients that
So
we had
next
booked
year,
for
you're
2023.
thinking, let's do a little more wholesale to kind of pad all the numbers? Because is it a pretty consistent, like if you could grow those 50 bunches of 10 stem bunches, you'd sell them kind of thing?
There are certain things that, yes, will always go. And I think that our buyers will grow for next year too. I think we did a really good job of communication this year. So
you don't all grow the same thing. Yeah.
we don't all grow the same thing. And we're also branching out to some designers in Charlottesville too, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's a smart move.
Yeah.
What does that mean, branching out to designers?
So, for example, I have worked with Mallory Joyce of Mallory Joyce Design, and she has used us for her past 3 weddings, like to source local flowers. She's super high end, but really interested in sourcing as much local product as she can. So one of my goals because she orders so much, is to meet with her over the winter and say, hey, what are your bookings for 2024 and 2025? Let us get those things in the ground and we'll grow specifically for you to like actually, if it's that much volume, to just meet the need directly rather than growing it and then trying to sell it.
Do you find that, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so Amanda mentioned our direct to consumer retail side of the flower business, wholesale, and then by far the biggest part of our business is wedding design. So growing and designing for weddings.
Yeah.
We know a great wedding venue just a few minutes down the road from our farm. We do lots of floral design for weddings here at Big Spring and a handful of other places in the region.
Actually, 2024 is our first Seasons Yield Big Spring rehearsal dinner wedding combo.
Oh, that's
Just saying.
your cousin's
My
wedding.
cuz.
Yes. Oh, that's going to be awesome.
What a banger that will be.
Yeah.
We're so jazzed.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That's so
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering if weddings was your biggest
Yeah.
income stream, and it makes sense, especially with like you were saying, the trend in weddings towards local floral designs. I mean, I see that everywhere, just as we're looking at venues and the big weddings that happen here, and what other venues are doing.
Yeah, and it's a unique product that we're offering in the sense that we require that if we're going to do the floral, and by we I mean Amanda is really the artist with the flowers. I'm helping grow as much as possible, but I don't
You're carrying the big carts of all the bouquets that she's made.
Yeah, she's the artist.
You're the pack mule.
We require that if we're going to do floral design for a wedding, it's all done with flowers that we grow on the farm. So that's part of the product that our clients are buying, which is that sort of holistic. It was all grown right here in the region, and it's right there on the table at your wedding. And that's what, the clients that we're getting, that's what we're finding is really valuable to them, is that it's kind of, that's the uniqueness of it, is they can say these flowers were grown right down the road, or, even if we're as far as Charlottesville or Bath County, where we also work, it's still in the region.
Yeah.
Do you guys have aspirations to make your farm itself open to the public more? Because I know it is for customers to come pick up, and you're doing the cut flower day this year for the first time. Is that on your radar at all? Because of the other flower farms I'm aware of, like one you've probably heard of too, and probably know way more about, is Hope Flower Farm up in Loudoun County, I think it is. Yeah, and
Holly Chappelle.
Yeah, she's got quite a thing going up there with retreats and all this stuff. It looks really cool. I've only seen it on Instagram. We've crossed paths in wedding industry forever ago. But anyway, is that part of your overall vision for Yonderyear?
I think it could be, as we branch out more into having like sections of the farm. I mean, you all know everything that's planted at our house is new. So like we don't have yet, I think, unless you go into the forest, and we have started to make more trails like into the forested areas of our property. But we need more division, I think, to like separate the house from the flowers, from the perennials, from the like nooks. That's what makes a property interesting. And you all have that in spades. And so do you with the barn, and then like the way that you fanned out from the bakery. So I think yes, but I would envision that being like a 5+ year thing to actually, I mean, we'll do more pick your owns and that kind of like casual thing on farm classes, but more like events or, flower retreats and things like that. I want our property to be a little more Victorian garden.
We're going back just a few steps, but you did the pastry, then you transitioned to the flower farming. Were you anticipating doing that all along? And then how did you educate yourself? Was it the old YouTube, or who's been inspirational in your learning such like questions?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I think as so many flower people would say, Erin Binziken, north of Seattle in Washington State, she owns and operates Floret Flowers.
Right. Okay.
And she is just incredible. I took her class several years ago, and I think that was the foundation for sure.
Was that online or in person?
It was online. She moved to fully online during COVID, as many things did. And so that was kind of the way that I started to organize in my mind what we wanted to do with flowers would work at our property. Before that, I mean, we took general ag classes at Washington State. We've done some things through Tech Extension. And then since taking Erin's class, I think Leanne Huber, who operates Cozy Town Dahlias in Maryland, she has been great, particularly for dahlias, for producing them in the Mid-Atlantic. Dahlias are native to Mexico, but they typically like drier and cooler conditions than we offer in Virginia summers. And so learning how to grow dahlias here instead of from someone who lives in Oregon or Washington, where dahlias are so like abundant.
Just easy to grow.
Has been really, really helpful because we have our own set of like diseases and pests and problems that come with growing these blooms here. So I would say her as well. And I've done a class of hers and plan to do a couple more.
It makes sense because we tried to grow a few dahlias ourselves just for fun. And like many things I've planted and tried to grow, it did not work at all. We got like 1 or 2 blooms. They were nothing like this.
They're a challenge for sure.
Man and Kevin, I'm
Yeah.
curious about several things about what's currently going on at the farm.
Sure.
But what are your big hurdles to growth, to time management, to like that you're facing every day? Like, what are those business hurdles that are in front of you right now?
Well, I'll take a step back and say that when we started, our business plan included not taking a paycheck for 5 years. So everything that we were making, we're reinvesting 100%. In that time, we are investing everything that is not like matching what we've grown the year before in annuals with perennials. Because annuals, things that you have to seed and grow every year, snapdragons, zinnias, all your hot season annuals. The more of those you have to do, they're super, super labor intensive because you're starting them from scratch every year. So you're starting with a flower farm. That's how you get a flower farm up and running quickly because you just buy seed and you grow that. But eventually what you want to do is have perennials be the bulk of what you're using for arranging and design because they're coming back every year. You're maintaining them over the winter when things are quiet anyway. And you're offering the interesting textures and like foliages and colors, and like perennials can be used at different points of growth throughout the season. Like spring, you use them for the flowers, summer, you use them for the foliage, fall, use them for the berries, or like the bark turns a different color or something like that. And so the more investment you have in perennials and getting them in the ground and mature, the more you can cut your labor costs and keep things lean in terms of an overhead perspective. So I would say that that's where our investment is going right now, and kind of the trajectory of where we're going with the farm in terms of plants.
It's like having mama cows that are going to calve every year versus buying in stockers and fattening them up to sell, you know, in 12 months kind of thing.
Yep. And so I think you asked kind of what the snapshot is in terms of what specifically we're growing at the moment.
Yeah, that and what hurdles, obstacles do you have in front of you, between you and growth? Like what is...
And I think like business growth, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
I would say, as they say in the tech industry, our rate limiting factor is that we are, you know, we're 1.5 employees at this point. We're very vertically integrated in the sense that we're producing a value-added product, the floristry, but we're also growing the commodity, the flowers that are required for that. So it's kind of it's multiple operations at once, which I think is a theme, you know, for most entrepreneurs around here. So there's a lot of different things to do. It's hard to streamline different processes and just get it super efficient because there's a lot of steps, a lot of factors involved, a lot of different, you know, Amanda might in a day be doing 10 different jobs.
Yeah.
And so I think that's hard to take that, to grow that from where we are now, which is really dependent upon us, and we're doing as much as we possibly can. So the only way to grow that is to add more labor.
Yeah.
And that's
Personnel.
yeah.
Labor is important. I'm also admittedly not easy to work with because I'm very particular. So I think I'm holding...
I'd be scared of you.
I think
if you were my boss.
I think I'm holding back
Smart.
on hiring somebody because I'm just a little concerned. Right now for big projects, we use Ruth Huffman is a good friend, and she brings her crew out when we've got something really big to do, and I can rely on those folks and I mean, it's not something that we can do all the time because obviously we're paying them like her wages, and that's fine because they do an amazing job. But we do need to figure out something that's a little more day to day.
We had an intern from a Washington Lee student this summer.
Shout out to Clara.
She was awesome.
Awesome.
And so that was great. But of course, that's, an 8-week thing. You train somebody up and then it's over. It's tricky.
Yeah. What we have heard from people who have to hire help for flower farming in particular is that, as Buddy mentioned, it is so romantic. It is so idyllic. So you get a lot of interest, but then people come out to the farm and it's July. It's 95 degrees. There are bugs everywhere. You are dirty and sweaty and hot, and the sun will not go away. And people do that for 2 hours and they're like, I don't want to.
That's when you're like, yeah, this is farming.
Yeah. I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. And so we have heard that, like hiring from the high school to like, the younger crowd is maybe not the best route to go. So we've got some people keeping their ear to the ground for us, and we would love for you guys to do that too. But we need a hard worker and somebody who's not scared to really dig in.
Yeah, y'all both do such a great job of hiring great people and cultivating great people and keeping them committed to what you're doing. You both sort of are models for us in thinking about how we, how we build a team. And I think it's one of those things that I wonder if you agree, but is hard for entrepreneurs who are building something themselves and can do all the things that they're doing to then get to that transition point where there's something that you're doing that you could hire somebody else to do. And it's not a task that requires no skill, but you can train the skill. And it's hard not to see that only as a cost. It's hard. I think it's a hard transition to see that, is actually, that's me making money because my time is more valuable. Exactly. Opportunity cost.
Right.
But I think that's a certain threshold in the entrepreneurial lifestyle of being able to hand off some of those things and not do it all.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask you. We talk about growth like it's a necessary thing, or of course it's going to happen. And in the growth, what I've noticed, I started baking because I love baking. That's what I was passionate about doing. And as we've grown, I do less and less of it. So as you think about growth, how do you preserve that which you love? And do you want to grow? What does Yonderyear look like moving into the future? Kind of what are you shooting for growth-wise? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I think in terms of business growth and like where we want to take the flower farm, I think a diversity of plants, always staying on top of new varieties that are coveted by florists and used in a lot of floral trends. Those are the types of things we're trying to get in the ground and like predict, where that's going. But I see us growing more in the like plant and seed development category as opposed to the growing scale category. I think Kevin also, we're particularly interested in the plants and how they grow on our little piece of earth, and what plants, if you're, whether it's like hybridizing, breeding zinnias or like dahlias from seed, or even trying to get into like bringing new types of perennials, hybridizing those. I think that is more in keeping with what we'd like to do in terms of like our business plan 5+ years out.
So with that, does that mean like specializing in these different flower types and really getting into the nitty gritty of what makes them grow well as a way to attract the floral designers or the big time planners, or, that kind of thing, or doing workshops for people interested in growing these kind of unique varieties? Is that because you guys are such masters of this craft already? So I'm curious how that grows the business side, because I totally get it on a, like, I keep going back to cattle. Like, I want to keep zeroing in on specific genetic traits in our herd.
Yeah.
And this sounds like there's maybe a parallel. But
Yeah.
can you speak to how you envisioned that connecting to the demand that you think is out there for?
Yeah, definitely. And Florette is already doing quite a bit of this with zinnias. But like, if you take a zinnia and say you've got like 50 of them growing, and all of them are bright red, which is like not a popular wedding color, but you've got one in one patch that's blush and one in one patch that's peach or something. You know, you cover them with like the little organza bags, you hand pollinate with a Q-tip, you save seed. Those are the traits that you're preserving, like in your herd. You take the seed from that, you plant it next year. Every year you're cultivating that particular trait that you want to see more of, because you know that that's what sells.
Gotcha.
And it's not necessarily seed that you can find.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you guys are, I'm distilling it down for my simple brain to understand. You guys are taking these hard to find flower species, or they have to be created on farm.
Yeah, more
Yeah.
colors.
Colors.
Because like
Got it.
the
Okay.
zinnia is the species. That's the
Oh,
flower
okay. Yeah,
type.
yeah.
But it's the within within
Gotcha.
that.
You're
Yeah.
painting that palette, and that
Yeah.
way, it's like we got it. Well, I love that design. You know, girl who's getting married. I love that vision. We need to go to Yonderyear to get those because
you
she's
can't
the
get
one.
that
Yeah.
color from the
Which
florist.
I think
Yeah.
does parallel with the analogy that you
Yeah.
were making about specific genetics within the breed of cattle that you're raising. You know,
Yeah.
you're trying to have your own niche.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
We I think this is unique to us, and everybody has different models with how they do events for booking weddings, but we design 100% with our own product. We don't buy in any product. We did have an early frost last year, and we bought dahlias from River City Flower Exchange. They were still Virginia dahlias. They just hadn't gotten a frost yet. But other than that, you know, we're designing 100% with the things that we're growing. And if that's going to be our business model, we want to give people a reason to use us. And that would be the fact that you see that flower, that's only a flower that we have.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The exclusivity. It's
Yeah.
awesome. One final question before our lightning round. Financial growth. Are you both trying to be full-time on farm? Kevin, you work part-time on farm, live full-time on farm. What's the future look like? What's the desirable outcome there?
I think we don't know for sure, as with everything in this life. There's multiple worlds that we can imagine, you know, and probably none of them will come true, and it'll always be something different than we planned. But, you know, certainly somewhere in the future to be determined, you know, whether it's a few years out or more. We're still relatively young. Yeah, we'd love to be doing it together full time. And certainly I'd love to be spending more of my time than I am now playing in the dirt. But we have a great setup. I have an awesome job and career, and it allows us to do this in this particular way, which is helping us grow with you know, a certain amount of comfort that you know, we're not, our daily bread is not determined by whether or not we get an early frost. So it de-risks it a little bit for us. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, we would like to spend our days together.
Yeah.
Awesome. Shall we move into the lightning round?
Yes.
You go first, bud.
Okay, lightning round. These are just short questions. Some are dumb. Most of mine are dumb.
Yeah.
But they're just they're kind of fun. So I love asking guests we have on the podcast, what's your go-to footwear on the farm?
Muck boot, chore boot.
Yeah, muck. I wear the low rise ones most of the time.
We talking at the ankle? We talking 6-inch? We talking the
The
calf
6
height?
inch, the I don't know what the designations
Yep,
are, but
I know
yeah,
what you're talking about.
it's not right at the ankle, not that one. The next one up, but then it's, you know, you got to have the tall chore boots
Yeah.
on the farm. And we've tried a number of different brands, and none of them seem to last as long getting beaten up in the way that we're using them as good old muck boots.
Muck Boot, feel free to sponsor the podcast
Yep.
if you're listening.
Do
Send
it.
us,
Send us some
Yonderyear
boots.
Farm.
Yeah.
You can find our
Dare
address.
Hill Road, Lexington.
Speaking of Yonderyear,
Yeah.
what is the origin of that name?
We were actually sitting around the dinner table with my parents and talking about a name for the farm. We had closed on the property. We hadn't moved to the property yet, and we wanted something that was colloquial, but had deeper meaning. And my dad was like, "Well, how about Yonder Farm?" Like, they're from around here. Have been in Lexington forever, and we were like, maybe there's something to that. And Kevin and I kept like ideating on it. And the farm name Yonderyear came from our ideas about what we wanted to pursue on the farm, taking pieces of past agricultural knowledge, but implementing those in a more modern way. So like a nod to the past while being mindful of the future.
We really
and,
wanted-
So cool.
and the motto of WNL is non incautus futuri, which is not unmindful of the future. So it was kind of
We
fitting
really
for us
wanted
too.
time to be a theme in our name, that we're honoring the past and preparing something that is looking toward the future, but most importantly that we're being present with one another. So
Yeah.
we also like the way it sounded.
It has
it's
a great
super
ring
catchy.
to it.
We wanted
Super
something
catchy.
sort of melodious to it.
Yeah.
Kevin, we don't do solar power on our farm because of the upfront cost scares me
Yeah.
a little bit. The idea sounds good.
Yeah.
Can you give me the pitch for solar power? You're 100% solar powered on the farm, or yeah?
Yeah, we actually need to add some because we're using more power now. The
have the
restrictions in
barn.
Virginia are such that you can only install, without special permitting, you can only install as much solar production power as you can prove you've already been using for the last few years. So there's limits without special exceptions. So we're a little bit underwater on it now on production. And we have net metering in Virginia, which means you still are connected to the grid. This is across Virginia, and you're actually still buying power technically from your utility, but you're selling the power that you're producing back to your utility. So without a battery, that's what we have to do until we can afford to put a battery on the system, which is a goal eventually. Anyway, the pitch is the ability to produce your own energy independently. I mean, the pitch to me has more to do with having the battery and not being dependent upon the power that your local utility is sending you, is just a huge part of sort of the independence that we're looking for in our lifestyle. And we, of course, believe strongly in renewable energy sources and the usefulness that they're going to have for us in the future. And so it's a big part of, for us, it's a big part of our overall vision to be able to produce our own power on the farm. And it is a big upfront cost, but I will say that we, without getting into too many of the details, we worked it out so that we financed it. There's big time government incentives, tax credits for when you install a system, and there's companies that'll work with you on that, so you can really take advantage of the tax credits that really reduce that upfront cost. And then we financed it in such a way that our loan payment is less than the average monthly utility bill that we were paying. Now it's the same amount every month, so it standardizes a little bit too, so you don't have the uncertainty of your utility payment. And after that runs out, then we're producing all of our power for free. So
That's super cool.
it's hard to deal with the upfront cost. It's hard as human beings to want to assume more cost up front. But if you take the long view, even if you don't care about renewable energy, you don't care about energy independence, you don't care about anything having to do with like the type of power that you're producing, just from a financial perspective,
It's cost
it's a better deal.
Kevin, you're adulterating the spirit of the lightning round.
Yeah. Sorry, you kind of hit my wheel.
Long, slow.
I think we're doing
thunder.
solar now.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least it seasons you.
Enough said here. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we've got a few more. If you weren't flower farming right now, what do you think you two would be doing?
Oh, you mean like
What
in
would be
farming or
what
just
would be the
anything?
entrepreneurial
Yeah,
outlet?
where would the energy go? We talked about the entrepreneurial energy. It finds an outlet.
Oh,
I would say either a wedding venue or a small bakery where we host people at our
Yeah.
farm
I knew it.
and serve them
Yeah.
coffee.
You have that look about you.
yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, I mean, we thought pretty seriously about a brick and mortar, a bakery, and it just for what we knew that being outside was the thing that we wanted more than anything else, and that was when we gave up on baking or opening a restaurant of any kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite perennial flower for both of you?
Perennial flower. Oh, the peony. How could you not? I mean, romance abounds.
Love it.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah, maybe the peony. My favorite annual flower is the Lysianthus. So if you're not familiar, look that up. Lysianthus,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful flower.
I will
Yeah.
have to look that up.
They're great.
Okay, last question for you guys. For anyone out there that's dreaming of starting a flower farm, as you guys have done so well, what is something you'd say to that person listening?
Great question.
Yeah. I would say that, as someone told me many years ago, you can't be what you can't see. And that has been a particularly hard lesson for the two of us. We don't come from farming backgrounds, and we also don't come from entrepreneurial backgrounds. So getting into this from a technical and a business perspective has been just the steepest of learning curves. And I would say for anyone who's interested in doing it, get out there and work on a flower farm. You know, you've got to see what the day-to-day is going to be like, not just the design side or not just the farming side or not just the seed saving side. Be exposed to all of it first, because it's going to take everything you have. It's going to be mind-bending. I mean, yesterday, I can't tell you the number of between like family and farming and like then the business side of things. My head, I did probably like 50 different like work, like pieces of the pie yesterday. It was the craziest day ever.
Yeah.
So I would also say probably, and I know that you all have done things maybe a bit differently, but for me at least, and like the challenges of being a mother and being an entrepreneur, I would say start on your entrepreneurial journey before having children. Not have a settled business necessarily, but have an idea. Have a really good idea. Have a foundation so that when you do enter that next stage of your life, if you decide to have a family, you're a little more settled with taking the time that that's going to require, and taking a step back from the business. Yeah.
I love that.
Saying that to our friends who each have their own whole crop of kids is
No, I
That
know what you
makes
mean.
total sense. Yeah.
We talked about a few episodes ago how, or I think I was saying how when you get married, that's one of your most powerful dynamic times ever, because when you're single, you're really dynamic. You can go live in, Cambodia and Tonga and do those things. But then once you join forces, you have now, it's like, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 1 + 1 equals a million. It's exponential in the power you can have together. And when you start doing things like having kids and taking on all the other responsibilities in life, your dynamic range, it starts to get more zoomed in on
Yeah.
the tasks that have to happen that day with other lives in the mix. So yeah, I totally I resonate with that too.
Can I
Yeah.
add one thing to the
Yes.
question of
Yeah.
advice? Whatever well, first of all, I would say you can do it. But whatever it is that you're envisioning, whatever it is that you're envisioning right now, it's going to be different than that.
Yeah.
So ask yourself why you want to do this specific thing. And this isn't just true of flower farming. And then maybe ask yourself why a couple more times to really get down to what is the thing that you really care about? What are the values or the real goals underneath that are kind of somehow being manifested in this goal of being a flower farmer? And then write that stuff down so that when the plan changes, when the vision doesn't come true exactly how you envisioned it several years ago, you can go back to the sort of underlying values and goals that you really had and make sure that you're staying true to those, even as your plan is inevitably
Shifting.
gonna
Yeah.
change. Everybody, what's the Mike Tyson quote? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And farming is basically getting punched in the face every day. So
Yeah.
it's going to be different.
And be patient with yourself, and like our 30s I think have just been a decade of patience. And also don't sell yourself short on, if you're coming to this a little bit later in life as we did, like don't sell yourself short on past experiences mattering. I would say that Kevin and I often go back to like, well, should we have just, when we got back from the Peace Corps in Cambodia, should we have just like started this right away? And like, there are things from high school, college, 20s, early 30s, all of those things I use every day. And it's all been a foundation to getting to where we are now. So, don't sell yourself short.
Love it.
It's a great end.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us on the podcast. I love your vision for integrating all the parts of your life into what you're doing on the farm. I love the vision for creating these unique products that you can't get anywhere else. And I'm excited for all the energy you have behind it and where it's going I'm excited for the cut flower event and seeing what it's like to have so many people actually see your beautiful farm. That's going to be cool to see what possibilities that could open up. And yeah, Dan and I are always here for you guys. If we can support anything you're doing, let us know. We have zero expertise in growing flowers, to be clear.
We're another mules.
Yeah,
mules.
but we can pack mule with
Yeah.
goodness.
The shared expertise that we have is trying lots of stuff, failing at a lot of it, and keeping going.
Yeah.
So that's
Keeping
what we
the
need each
winners.
other for.
Yeah. So if people want to find out more about Yonderyear, where can we go?
Our website is yonderyearfarm.com. And our only social at the moment is Instagram. So our handle is at Yonderyear Farm. And that is where we do most of our visual updating. Our website is becoming more and more comprehensive. And if you go to our website, you can also sign up for our newsletter. We do not do more than one newsletter a season, usually not even one a season. So we won't flood your inbox.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. And a special thank you from Seasons Yield for the beautiful flowers and for not opening a brick and mortar bakery, because we would be out of business.
Stop
That's
it.
absolutely not
Stop
true.
it.
Thank
So
you.
true.
Serious. It's so true.
No, I'm sorry.
We all
It's
know
not
it.
true.
No, all right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.